last couple of podcasts, we've really been talking about our inner circle. We've been talking about the people that you hang around with that are in the room that you're in, and is it time to change rooms? Dr. Wright, he's in a room that I want to be in.
Listen, brother, thank you for having me, because I recognize the value of being in community and being in close proximity with people that I can actually build with. Because I do believe that one of the greatest decisions that we will make at our age, even our children, or even as we get older, is our circle of influence. And I may just learn and pick up one thing, and that not only does it shift my perspective, but it can change the trajectory of my life.
Okay, welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast. When I usually say that I'm excited, I truly am excited because we have just some incredible guests that are on here. But today is beyond excitement. Today is where you go, the pinnacle of, just things that you can learn and do. As I was saying in my prayer today, where I said, "Dear Lord, give me the wisdom to do the things you put me on this earth to do, so that I can please you and serve others." And when I think about Dr. Reggie, I think about serving others. I think about the things that he's done. I think, when I see some of the speeches he's done, and I see the schools that he goes to, and the kids that he affects, and the people when he stands up and he talks, and he just gives life and breathes life into folks. Folks that are, whether they're stuck and trying to move forward, or they're in a place where, hey, I'm doing good, but I want to do better. Dr. Wright is one of those folks that just helps you do that. And he's got this great history. I don't want to give up his history and start talking about all the wonderful things he's done. I've been lucky enough to have other conversations with them. And just, if there's people in my life that you think of, the last couple of podcasts, we've really been talking about our inner circle. We've been talking about the people that you hang around with that are in the room that you're in. And is it time to change rooms? Is it time, if you're at the top of the, like 2 guests ago, he said, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. And so what I love about this conversation that we're going to have today is I am definitely not the person at the top of the room or the smartest person in the room. And Dr. Wright is really going to, he's in a room that I want to be in consistently, continually. He has, as you will see, the folks that he hangs around, the folks that he interacts with, just bleed out in everything he does. And so, Dr. Wright, just thank you for being on the podcast today. Thank you for being part of this Journey to Freedom venture. We're doing 100 Black men this year, and just excited to see where this conversation is going to take us, because I know it's going to free up some people in their thought process. It's going to free up in them in their ability to move forward in their life. So maybe you can just kind of start out about your life. You can start wherever you want. I said earlier, you can start at the womb if you want, or you can start right in the middle, but wherever you want. We're excited to be part of it and hear you in there. So yeah, please tell us about you and your life.
Well, first of all, listen, brother, thank you for having me. It's an honor, it's a privilege. I feel like any chance that we have, especially as men of color, to support each other, to collaborate and partner together, especially for causes like this, is something that I take with a great level of importance, and I value it. So kudos to you, man, for what you're doing. 100 Black men in a year. That's inspiring. It's motivating to even somebody like myself. So Dr. B, you are the man. For the listeners, you are the man. So I'm here to support you. But man, there's so much that I could share. You said from the wound. I'll go back, and I won't take up too much time, and you can kind of ask me questions, and we can kind of go from there. But I was born and raised in the city of Trenton, New Jersey. So Trenton, New Jersey is the capital of New Jersey. It's a small city. It's about 7 square miles, approximately 90,000 people. Inner city context. I was born in the early 80s. I can't really give the exact year, because a man should never give his age.
I love it.
I don't want people to start doing the math and trying to figure it out, but I was raised during the war on drugs and the crack epidemic, right? I remember being part of, the white flight. I remember seeing people in the neighborhood, in the community, where there were people actually, there was Caucasians in the neighborhood, and they started to filter out and move out. I was raised by my grandmother. My grandmother's a school teacher for 35 years. 35 years in an inner city context in Trenton, New Jersey. She was raised. So, you know, for me, she instilled the value and the importance of education, and she really emphasized character. Education and character was huge for my grandmother. You know, for her, it was not this or that, it was this and that. Right. So she said, you're going to always keep your head in the books, but I always want to make sure that you're mindful of how you're behaving and how you're carrying and conducting yourself. And she stepped in to raise me because my mother got pregnant with me at 19 years old and gave birth to me at 20. My father was in the military, but he wasn't really active in my life growing up. So he wasn't there. His presence wasn't there, and his support wasn't there either. And my mother, you know, obviously being young, 20, you know, 20 is a baby having a baby. You know how that goes.
Yes, absolutely.
So just like so many grandmothers did, she stepped in and she said, if this baby is going to have a chance to be successful, a chance to be better than, you know, some of us, you know, in terms of what they went through in the past, she said, I need to step in. So that's kind of the origin of where things started in Trenton, New Jersey.
Okay, so, you know, and you think about, you know, the educational purpose, and you know, I kind of really jump into identity a little bit. It sounds like you had a sound environment with that, with despite everything going around in the city and the war on drugs and the ability to get in gangs, you were grounded with an identity that said, this is who you are. You know, this is who you're going to be based on, you know, so what, how did having those people and those, you know, I guess your grandma and your, you know, and even despite everything else, you be able to make it out where others didn't?
Yeah. So I didn't have much of a choice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there wasn't like, there wasn't many options. It wasn't, my grandmother didn't give me an option. It wasn't like you have a choice to go to school and do well. You have a choice to go to school and behave. It was, these are the standards, right? These are the expectations. So I know there's a lot of external things going on outside of the four walls of this house, but that doesn't matter. Like, I'm raising you to become a man of character. And even though I've made, you know, tons of mistakes, obviously over the years, just like we all have, it was non-negotiable. It was like, I don't care what goes on in the streets. I don't care what your peers may think of you, right? I understand there's a lot going on out there, but in this house, this is how we're going to do things. And, you know, my grandma's always tell me, you know, as long as you live in my house under my roof and I pay the bills, you're going to do things my way. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't, there was no room for negotiating. You know, it was this is how it's going to be. And if I didn't measure up to those standards, and they were age appropriate, realistic, achievable standards, but if I didn't measure up to those standards, there was consequences. And she stood firm in what she believed, and she stood firm in what she meant. So, you know, I didn't always agree. We butt heads a lot of times growing up. There was a lot of tension because I wanted to do one thing and she had a different set of rules. But obviously, as I grew up, I understood the place in which she was coming from was a place of love, a sense of direction and guidance. And I always say, like, I wouldn't be the man I am today if it wasn't for her. God graced me with a grandmother. He blessed me with a grandmother that at the time I couldn't see the value, you know, but now reflecting back on, you know, what she has meant to me, what she still means to me, because she's still here with us. I just wouldn't be who I am without her, man.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And that, I like the part where we rise to the level of expectations and standards that are put on us. And when you think about the you know, those of you who are parents who are watching this, and those of you who are saying, how do I raise my kids? And, you know, they will rise to the level of expectations you put on them. And so many times we say, you know, but, you know, I you know, whether it's a helicopter parent or whatever it is, that, you know, we need to give them this and we need to give them that. And I think what develops strong men that we need to be as we, you know, is that character that is I don't want to say forced upon us, but brought upon us by, some heavy, my grandma was the same way, like go outside and find a switch and better don't make me pick it, and so, whatever that character development that happens there. Were there other, you think about communities, and some communities come alongside people that they think are going to go somewhere or think that they're going to do well. And unfortunately, it doesn't always happen to everybody that's in that neighborhood. Were there other men and other community members that were part of your life as you were growing up? Or was it, pretty much your grandma that just made sure everything went well?
Yeah. So my grandmother and my biological grandfather got divorced when I was young. I want to say maybe like 3 years old, 3 or 4. So obviously, I interacted with my biological grandfather in the early stages of my childhood, but my grandmother got remarried to the man that I call Papa C. His name is Curtis. And, he came into the picture when I was 5 years old. And I lied to you not, he is the mere definition of a man that will step into the role and treat a young Black boy as if he's his own. Wow. Like, you would think that I was his biological. Like, even for me, like right now, doing this interview, this podcast is like, I have to remind myself that I'm not his own flesh and blood. He loved me in such a way that I feel like there's no doubt that I'm his own flesh and blood. Like, I have to remind myself, like, nah, that's not how it went down. But I learned a lot from him. He wasn't present as much when I was young because he worked 2 jobs. So you have to understand, my grandmother was a school teacher during the day, and then she would go clean homes at night. Like, and she did that for years, right? For years. My grandfather, Papa C, I'm talking about, he would go work from 7 to 3 and then go to his second job from 4 to 10. And he did that literally for like the first 11, 12 years of the time that I've known him. So from the time I was 5 to the time I was about 17, 16, about 16, 17 in high school, he would go to work from 7 to 3 and then 4 to 10. He would come home by 11 p.m. I would leave my math homework on the table, and he would check my math homework. My grandmother would stay up and make sure he had something to eat when he came in. And when I would wake up in the morning, he was already gone to work. He was at work by the time I woke up to go to school. He never complained. He was always patient. Never complained, was always patient. Never raised his voice at me. Never belittled me. Never degraded me. Right? Like, he always treated me as if I was his own. Like, all the time. And when he retired, when I was in high school, he would take me to school. He would pick me up from school. He would come to my practices. He would support me. He would encourage me. Man, listen, when I tell you my grandparents are rock stars, especially in the time that I was growing up in that era when there was so many external factors, like drugs was prominent in the inner city back then. That was the crack epidemic, man. So there was so much that was plaguing. But yeah, they set the standards, man. I just knew what it was. But they gave me a lot of love, but it wasn't like, Reggie, we love you. It wasn't more so like that. It was love through actions, right? Through the sacrifice, right? I saw it through the sacrifice, but I also knew, my grandmother was more like, fire and brimstone. My grandfather was more like, he would just look at me a certain way, and I knew kind of like, shape up. This is not the way to go. This is not what I should be doing right now. But I had a lot of respect for them because I saw the hard work and the sacrifice they was making for me. And I knew that they really cared and loved me.
So do you believe that work ethic that you saw as an example rubbed off on who you are today, as far as, your tenacity, your willingness to do stuff, or, is that a big part of your character now based on what you saw before, or you kind of just developed, the way you developed? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I feel like I watched them work so hard, and I used to always ask myself a question: is there a way where I could work smarter, right, and still get the same kind of results, right? Like, so I value, and I was impressed with their ability to work hard. But if somebody, when I was young, I heard the phrase, we all have heard the phrase, right? Work smarter, not harder. So I was trying to understand, like, what does it mean to work smarter? So, like, for example, my grandmother, she didn't believe in what she would consider taking the easy way out. So if there were weeds that need to be pulled, she would have me go outside and pull the weeds, like manually by hand. And I said, Grandma, you know, there's something called like Roundup, right? There's this stuff you can spray on these weeds that will kill the weeds in a fraction of the time that I would have to go out and manually pick them by hand. And she said, son, I'm not paying for no Roundup. Like, you are my Roundup. Right?
You're my Roundup. You're the one changing my channels on my TV. Yeah.
That was her mindset was, I'm not going to pay someone to do something I can do for myself. But my mindset was, okay, I heard this guy once say it this way, Dr. B. You can either make money with the sweat between your brow, or you can make money with what's, you know, right here, what's above your brow. You know, so I learned, I'm like, okay, how can I take this thing called education and figure out how we can change the trajectory of my life where I still get results, but I don't have to have the same type of manual labor that I saw them, because they worked hard, man. They worked hard, brother. Hard.
Wow. I love that, because it's that we saw work ethic and the willingness to work and do whatever it takes. And then realize, and I think this is what they wanted for us, right? Because they understood this is the only way that we know how to do this. We need you to go get this education so you don't have to work as hard as we do to be able to get stuff done. So you get the willingness. My grandpa was the same way. He had a dairy, and it was, you know, I remember milking cows and, you know, and mending fences and getting up and sitting on the tractor with them before it even light came up, right? And he worked his butt up, but towards the end of his life, he started realizing, he would tell me, you don't need to work this hard, boy. I mean, that's literally what he would say, you know, after the years and years that he did. And so I love that we're able to do this. So when we think about education, and I know, you know, you've been part of the education system, and your grandma taught for 35 years. How important was getting that education and what you took from it in your life today? I mean, there's parts of it. I mean, we were both sitting here with doctorates, and we're going, okay, you know, was it worth the time you spent in doing it? What's your thoughts on the education?
Yeah. So again, because the audience needs to understand this, right? Because I want to make sure I'm painting an accurate picture. Yes. I despised school growing up. I despised it. Like 100%. It was unrelatable to me. It wasn't relevant. I didn't see the value. I didn't see how it could help me become quote unquote successful. But again, growing up in inner city context, I equated success to sports, entertainment, or the music industry, right? It was one of those three. So even though I enjoyed music, you know, I didn't want to be no rapper or singer. I didn't want to be an actor. I did fall in love with basketball, and it wasn't about the money. It was about, I really fell in love with Michael Jordan, right? That was the era that I was being raised in. So I had dreams and aspirations of being a professional basketball player. I just didn't see the correlation with education in regards to school, right? I understood the value of reading and gaining knowledge. I used to read like these basketball books to try to pick up like basketball skills. So I understood that, but I just didn't see how education, going to school, would help me become successful. It wasn't until after I completed my undergrad degree, like after and while I was in undergrad process as an EOF student, that I was like, man, now I see the correlation between success and education. And that was during like my undergrad years is when it started to click for me. And that's because I started paying attention to my peers. And I'm like, okay, there are people that are much more talented than me. They have a lot of skill, right? They're valuable, you know, in sports and even entertainment, but they're not maximizing their potential. And I used to ask myself, why? Like, why they're not maximizing their potential? And how can I learn and grow if I want to be successful? Because college, things change in college, right? In high school, you know that typically the next phase is to go to college. But when you're in college as an undergrad student, you're like, the next phase is life. So if you really care and you want to be successful, right, you got to start figuring out, okay, what does success look like for me? And how can I achieve it? And my thing was at the time was sports. But I used to think to myself, like, okay, well, how else can I further my ability to become successful in life outside of sports? And to me, the correlation was education, right? They had this thing called education outweighs it all when I was growing up. And they had this t-shirt, and it had a scale, and it had books. Yeah, they had books, and the books were here, and the sports is here. And it was showing like books outweigh athletics, like a soccer ball, a basketball, a baseball, a football. Because when this deteriorates, when the body deteriorates and the body slows down, your mind is still there. So if you can increase in wisdom and knowledge, then you could be successful. So I learned that in college.
That's so good. And when I think of education, I was a special ed kid that, I got to go to college on an athletic scholarship as well. And, I told my mom I wasn't going to college. I was going to stunt school. I wanted to be a stunt man, and that's all I wanted to do. And so literally that's why I went to college in California, for Colorado, because I wanted to be close enough where I could leave school and go be a stunt man. Wow. But what I realized is because the folks that I grew up with weren't the people who were talking the same way as the people that were at the college. It wasn't actually in the classroom that I was really starting to understand the power of education. It was the other students that were at the school I went to that had different parents, that had different experiences, that had different upbringings, that had, I don't want to say privilege or whatever else. And I start to hang around them and say, wait a minute, if I want to have some of the life they have and be able to do some of the things they get to do and go on some of the vacations they get to go on, I'm going to have to learn some stuff.
Yeah. I heard something, Doc, that changed my life when I was in college. And I didn't hear it prior to college. This is when I heard it. And I don't remember who said it or where I was at when I heard it. I just remember hearing it. And I remember them saying that Black people don't read. And I'm like, what do you mean Black people don't read? I remember asking the question. And they said that the saying reigns true. This is what was told to me, that if you want to keep something from a Black person, put it in a book. Right now, I know historically speaking, we come from an oral tradition, and I understand why we come from an oral tradition when you trace it back to slavery and all that kind of stuff. Right, we were denied the access to learn, education, Jim Crow. Like, I understand all that stuff, but when I heard that at that period of time for me in my life as a collegiate student, they said if you want to understand something, or if you want to keep something, put it in the book. So the first thing I told myself was, if I want to grow and I want to learn, I need to find a book. So I'm like, well, what books to read, right? Because I grew up with this mindset. Like, the mindset is huge. I grew up telling myself, I told my own self, I don't like reading. I told my own self, I'm not reading. I'm never going to read it. Like, because the stuff they were presenting to me in school, the Macbeth, the Shakespeare, all that stuff, it was stuff that I personally didn't like. But when I got to college, I wanted to be a professional basketball player, and I realized I had an opportunity to go play in Europe. And I had this fear because I had heard about athletes going broke. So I had this fear that if I made it, and I had all the confidence that I would make it, how could I manage my money well? So at the time, there was a local NFL player named Troy Vincent that was playing for the Eagles, and I had a relationship with him. And Troy was actually starting a financial, like a financial advisory company.
Okay.
And he allowed me to go to his company and have like a free consultation. And I sat down with a financial advisor. And the stuff that the financial advisor was telling me, it was so foreign to me, Dr. B. I was like, I had never even heard of these concepts. I didn't even know this stuff existed. And I'm like, well, how do I find out more about this? They recommended some books, right? And then once I graduated, a friend of mine, like, I thought that when I graduated from college, Dr. B, I was like, only thing I could do was rent. In my mind, only thing I could do was rent. I can't own anything because I had never been around anybody that owned anything besides my grandmother, and she owned a house in the inner city. But I had a friend of mine who was Black, who looked like me, that was like, Reg, you can buy a condo. And then Troy, one day after we worked out, Troy was like, well, how much you gonna pay in rent? You can pay the same thing in a mortgage. And I'm like, but I don't even know I don't even know the process of buying. Like, I don't even know what to do. I was scared. It's an intimidating process as a young Black man when the school hasn't taught you that. Right. But then this Black guy named Dion, he said, Reg, I'm going to give you this book. He said, I know you don't like to read, but just promise me you'll read this book. Just open it. I'm telling you. The book was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Woo, Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah.
And listen to your boy.
Quadrants, yes.
Listen, shifted my whole paradigm, has changed my life. I'm still benefiting from the book today as we speak on this podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. And I love that you kind of helped us transition into finances, because it's so vitally important. I remember, going to college and showing up on campus, and they had all these tables that were lined up with people wanting to give you credit cards.
Yeah.
And yeah. And hey, why not? This is like school, right?
Yeah.
So I got a Sears card. They gave it to me. I went and went over to Sears. I think it had like a $300 limit or something on it, and I went and I decked out my dorm room or whatever it was. And then like the next month the bill came, and I'm like, I haven't graduated yet. What are you sending me a bill for? Like, you don't understand. I'm thinking it's part of the, it happened on school. Yeah. And we don't talk about money in our culture very much.
Yeah.
We don't have those conversations. I'm so glad that you got a book, and that started. I mean, a book isn't everything, but then you start getting around people who are making money. You start getting around people who are moving forward and that are willing to talk about it. And I would, submit to everybody who's like, if you don't have a lockdown on your finances, which we all can learn more, we all can grow more. It's vitally important that you start having these conversations, because if you don't, we get stuck, and then we see our white counterparts or our Asian counterparts or the other folks that are doing well because they literally talk about that kind of stuff at the dinner table. Dad talks about what an insurance policy is and how it works, and why it's better. I'm on the lending side, and I have a lady right now who called me and said, I want to buy my first house. And she's going to be a medical doctor, and she's just getting ready to start a residency, and she makes she's going to make like $24,000 a year or something on her residency, and she's saying, can I buy a house with that? And I'm like, why not? But I haven't had a whole bunch of folks in our culture come up to me and say, I'm doing this and this and this, I want to buy a house.
Yeah.
Because it's not like expected. Her things, why would I ever rent? That's her mindset, is just like, why would that be something? Apartment? Why would I live in an apartment? I don't know anybody who lives in an apartment. Yeah. And so are there any other, like, as we're talking about money and finances, as you did Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and you were able to get your house and be able to do, what are some of the things that you talk about when you're talking to others that attain to money, and how folks can get access to finding out what they need to know?
Yeah. So, growing up, my grandmother never really taught me, like, there was no structure in terms of financial literacy, but she used to ingrain in me this concept, like, save money for a rainy day.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Save money for a rainy day. And I never knew how much money should be saved up for a rainy day, but I knew there should be money saved up for a rainy day. I think what helped me, honestly, was before I actually had the financial education, before I became somewhat knowledgeable, was just the fear of going back to that which I came from. Mm-hmm. Right. So and it was also so much doubt. Like, I came from a Division III school. So to say that I want to play professional basketball, people already had their doubts. They were already telling me what I couldn't do. But what I didn't want to do was go back home. Like, I didn't want to go back home. I didn't want to have to go back into the house and ask my grandmother to do the very thing she had did for me before I became 18 as a man. But it wasn't until I was in college. It wasn't until I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It wasn't until I got around some rooms, into some spaces as an athlete with some people that had already been successful, where I was learning some principles that really shifted the way that I would think. And one of them was my mentor. His name is Charlie Ward. So, I don't know how much, your listeners know about sports, but Charlie went to Florida State and he won the Heisman. And at the time he was playing for the New York Knicks, and he became my mentor. And I used to just go with him in the summertime to literally just stay with him and his family. And one of the things that I would watch him do was how he managed his money based on the decisions that he was making. right? Our decisions are based off our choices.
Mm-hmm.
And he would choose, like, for example, we would fly somewhere. I'm like, you play for the Knicks. This is what I'm thinking internally. I'm thinking we're going to fly somewhere first class. Like, no, we just got regular economy tickets like everybody else.
Yeah.
Like, not exit row, like just regular tickets. And I'm like, I remember asking him one day, like, you talk about like just a paradigm shift. I remember, like, I literally asked him one day, I know you're a millionaire. Why don't we sit like first class, or why don't you sit first class or exit row or something like that? He was like, the plane's going to take me to the same destination it's going to take the people in first class. Right? That, like, so that mindset from someone, I'm like, because what he was teaching me is the long game.
Mm-hmm.
It's the long game. It's not just about where you are today. It's about where do you want to be 10, 15 years from now. And I was learning that in college when he was mentoring me. And I, you know, before I met Charlie, I had never had an example of a black man and woman together.
Really?
So
okay.
No, I had never, besides the Cosby Show.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Not in person, because my grandmother and my grandfather to me were just like my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
I had never seen a husband and wife, a black man and a black woman together in the same household. I knew it existed. I had just never experienced it personally.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, so to be able to stay with him and be in that environment and see how he was making decisions, it was so impactful for me. It was empowering, to be honest with you.
Wow, that's so cool. Let's talk about trust a little bit, because, you know, one of the things that I love, and the reason I'm even doing this is based on, you know, this ability to think about who do you trust? How do you trust? How do you show up at trust? How does it shape your identity? You know, you get these associations, you get these rooms, and you trust people. You grew up in the inner city where trust had to be hard. It had to be something like, I don't know, when I show up, you know, you look at swivel head or whatever it is. What kind of things do you trust people from the beginning of a relationship, and just trust that they got your best at heart? Do you show up like, wait, I want them, you know, kind of a little bit on, you know, until they prove themselves wrong? What's your process? And some people haven't thought through this, but it's so important in everything we do. How do you think you show up and develop the ability to trust?
Yes, great question. Great question. I think for me, initially, is giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
Because that's what I would want somebody to do for me, is to give me the benefit of the doubt. And then I like to try to spend time, right? You know, going to school, you learn something called koinonia, right? That's community. Mm-hmm. So spending time with people in community, right, will allow me to foster trust and build that trust over time. But initially, I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt until they show me otherwise, because I recognize the value of being in community and being in close proximity with people that I can actually build with. But I am very strategic in regards to who I spend time with, because I do believe that one of the greatest decisions that we will make at our age, even our children, or even as we get older, is our circle of influence, right? Like our community, right? The people that we spend time with, our network, can have a tremendous effect on us. I do believe the people that we're in community with are either an asset or a liability, right? And they're either moving the needle towards our goals, or they could potentially be hindering us. So in terms of trust, like, I want to give individuals the benefit of the doubt, you know, right away from the jump, you know, and then as we spend time, then you'll kind of see like, okay, do we have some things in common? Do we have a similar mindset? You know, are our goals aligned? I mean, no two individuals are the same, but it's important to be around people that you align with. And, you know, like you said early on, or we were talking, you know, before we got started, it's important to make sure that your circle of influence and that the community you're in, that you're not the smartest one. You know, and that's some of the decisions I've been making recently over the last few years, is about being in rooms with people where literally, as that saying goes, I just want to be a fly on the wall. Like literally, I just want to be a fly on the wall. I just want to hear the conversations, knowing that sometimes I could be in a room for 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours, and I may just learn and pick up one thing. And that not only does it shift my perspective, but it can change the trajectory of my life.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. You said something. You said assets or liabilities. And it sounds kind of harsh when you think of human beings, right? Because we're in community, and you show up and you go, is this going to be a situation for me that is going to move the needle to make my life better, or is it going to move the needle to make my life work? You know, and there's going to be liabilities. I mean, we all have family, we all have folks that they're going to be. But to think in that context, how important is it for us to guard that important portion of our life that allows us to be able to serve others? I guess that's how I look at it. Is I have to put myself in a place where I can be an asset to somebody else. Because if I'm just looking for people to be an asset for me, then that's, you know, kind of selfish. But if I'm, you know, I feel like it might be. But if I'm truly looking on, I need to be in these rooms with these people so that I can then be able to share or grow or help others grow. What's your thought on when you show up in different spaces? Are you thinking assets, liabilities? Are you thinking this person? I mean, that it sounds harsh, but it's almost necessary, right?
But in context, right? I remember, I think Steve Harvey said, like, the worst thing you could do is introduce a big dream to a small mind, right? Oh. So when I'm saying assets versus liability, like you said, we all have relatives, right? You don't choose your family, but I'm talking about people. Like, I can spend time with my family on holidays or birthdays, but I'm talking about Dr. B, people that I'm in community with, right? I'm talking about like people that are close and dear to me, right? People that, you know, that they hold me accountable and I hold them accountable, right? That's different than just spending time maybe with one of my cousins, you know, at a family reunion. You know, there are people that may not be an asset that you spend time with in moderation. So for the listeners, I want to make sure they hear it in the correct context.
Yes.
I'm not saying that every time I go anywhere with anybody, they're either an asset or liability, but I'm talking about the people that's in my circle of influence. The key word is people that are influencing me. Right. So if you have that place in my life where you're influencing me, that means that we're in community together. And therefore, we need to be aligned because we should be helping each other. We should be spurring each other on. Right. Like as the scripture says, like as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. Right. So we need to be sharpening each other. What we're doing here is sharpening each other.
Yeah.
That's different than spending time with individuals who may not be an asset in terms of help me accomplish my goals. But I can see them and spend time with them cordially in moderation. I don't think there's anything wrong with that because we all have relatives and people like that.
And I think we're called to be in community. And you know, as you're alluding to, one of the things that you said is time. And when I'm thinking about, you know, the assets and liabilities, I'm also not thinking about real life people all the time, you know, because we can turn on a television set and we can relate and we can and almost feel like we're part of somebody else's family because we spent so much time. We could watch YouTube reels, we could watch TikTok, we could watch, and we're, you know, I literally feel like sometimes people are telling me these stories of something they saw on a reel as if they're like, we're in the room. Yeah. And so like how much, you know, how do you figure out what time that is? Because, you know, you even talked about the Cosby Show, you know, that was an example for all of us. And I couldn't wait for Thursday nights every single week. And I was in college when it started, and it was like, we are not doing anything. We were at work, you know, because I was a janitor and all my buddies were, you know, we all worked at the school. Well, our work stopped at 7:30 for the Cosby Show, right? Yeah. You know, we almost felt like we were part of the show as a positive influence at the time. You know, as this is a possibility, really, a doctor and a lawyer in the same family, and they can do all these things, you know. So, you know, I looked at it as a positive, but how do you guard against with your time? Because you only have so much of it, right? That's the one thing is finite, is the time that we have. In your world, how do you make sure that you're spending time on things that either create assets or and then are not liabilities for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, time management is crucial for me because I recognize that if I'm not managing my time well and I'm wasting my time, essentially I'm wasting my life, right? And for me, I'm not naive to think that, like, I don't know when my expiration date is going to come. I don't know when my time on this earth is going to end. So do I need time to relax? Yes. Do I need time to kind of, you know, to recoup and rejuvenate? Yes. But I always thought of the concept, like, I love vacation, right? People like, I'm going on a vacation. And I always felt like if I'm going on a vacation, I really should be getting away from the fact that I've been working hard, right? And if I've been working hard, that means that I've been managing my time well and I'm being productive. You know, so for me, I want to be effective and efficient in regards to how I utilize my time, because that's like the one thing you just mentioned is true for me. I can mismanage finances and make more money. Doc, we can't get time back.
Yeah, get time back, right?
We can't get time back. So the quote from Thomas Watson has a quote. It says, "Time misspent is time that is lost, time that cannot be regained." Now, as a Christian, as a believer, I know that God can redeem time in terms of maybe if we mismanage relationships or something like that. But practically speaking, we can't get time back, right? So I'm always trying to be mindful of what I'm doing with the time that I have each and every day, again, to move the needle, right, towards the goals. And the goals can be spending time with my son. It could be reading 15 minutes a day, spending time with my family, etc. But I am very conscious of how I spend my time, because I understand that time is so valuable.
Yeah, and it becomes even more prevalent the older we get. As we, I had the, I don't know what meeting I was at, and he took that ruler out, and he said, okay, this is 0, and black men usually live to be 73. And he put that, here, and he goes, okay, so put it, take this hand, or no, I guess this hand here, and put it where you're at right now. And then that's how much time you got if you live to the average age. And I was like, oh my God. And this is how much time you spent already. And how did you spend it? And it just becomes so vitally important. We talk about faith. I don't know, did you grow up having to go to church? I was listening to somebody today, and he was talking about, well, you got to live your life thinking about the future and not thinking about the past. And, and the faith is what comes by living, the perception of the future. And, it is huge how big, faith in my belief system has allowed me to move forward in life. Talk about with you. I mean, you said as a Christian, this is part of who you are. How big and how do you integrate it into things that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I know that my greatest need is my faith in Christ, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I do believe that He is Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And for me, I'm rooted and grounded in that. And I think my life is evident of that. So, as a professional speaker, one of my talk topics is called "The Impossible is Possible." And when I'm talking about the impossible is possible, I'm not saying it because of anything that's uniquely special about me. I'm saying it's because when you trace back, right, my story, which is ultimately His story, you can see God's hand in my life. Right, from the fact that my mother conceived me at 19, gave birth to me at 20, and my grandmother literally stepped in a year after finishing raising my mother and my uncle, who are a year apart, and she had to start that whole process all over again. That's a means of grace. She didn't have to do that. What if she would have said, "I raised my 2 kids, right? You got pregnant with him. You figure it out. Do the best you can. I'll help out when I can." But she didn't do that. She stepped in. That's a means of grace, right? Yes. Fast forward into college, when I recognized in college I had no male influence, right? Now I'm watching my peers. I went to college in a city called Jersey City, New Jersey, which is essentially Trenton on steroids, right? It's a bigger version of Trenton, New Jersey, inner city, drug infested, poverty, you name it. And so when I get to this school, I'm like, man, this is what I'm saying, Doc. I said, if I want to have a chance to be successful in life, I started praying, Lord, please provide me with some type of male leadership, like a black man that can help me, because I knew I needed guidance. Doc, my coach came into the locker room and had 1 ticket to go to the Knicks and Nets game. 1 ticket. Who comes into the locker room and offers a team full of 15 players 1 ticket, right? And I know at the time as a junior, I'm like, one of these upper class and one of these seniors are going to raise their hand and be like, absolutely, I want to go to the game. But let me show you how God works. No one wanted to go to the game because they didn't want to go by themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Because they only had 1 ticket. So I raised my hand. I'll go by myself. I have no problem. After I took the ticket, walking back from the practice facility to my room, the Lord put in my spirit, the Knicks have Charlie Ward. I have been following the Knicks because my uncle was a Knicks fan. Mm-hmm. And what I remember about Charlie was never about what he was as an athlete, but it was about his character, right? How he carried and conducted himself during interviews, the way that he just carried and conducted himself in the public. And I was just watching from afar, like you said. I thought I knew the man, even though I had never met the man. I get to the game and go into the arena an hour and a half early with the hopes of walking down as far as I can go until security will stop me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what I did. But my plan wasn't in place because Charlie wasn't on the court. So I did the next best thing. I asked the coach. I yelled out, I said, Coach Chaney, would you be willing to come over and talk to me for a second? He walked over to me and said, young man, how can I help you? I said, Coach Chaney, my name is Reggie Wright. I'm a junior in college. I said, would you be willing to ask Mr. Charlie Ward if he'd be willing to come out and speak to me? I'm seeking some guidance and mentorship. He said, I can't make any promises, but I'll ask him. I stood there nervous, sweating. It was only probably about 5 minutes, but it felt like 50 minutes. About 5 minutes later, here comes this guy button up his warm-up. Can you imagine an NBA player walking out of the tunnel, walking towards you, button up the and he comes to me, he says, how can I help you? Which led me to believe that Coach Chaney asked him, obviously gave a description of me. He walked up to me and I said the same thing. I said, Mr. Ward, I said, I'm a collegiate student. You know, I'm just seeking some guidance. I don't have any male figures in my life, but I know that I need guidance if I want to have a chance to be successful in life. He told me to meet him in section 116 after the game.
What? Oh my gosh.
I went to section 116 after the game. And for 30 minutes, I stood there waiting, thinking to myself, right? You know, the mind will play tricks on you.
Of course.
He's going to ghost me, right? He's not going to show up. Why would he come up here and speak to me? The whole time I'm standing next to this man that had salt and pepper hair and salt and pepper beard. Would you believe it? It was Charlie Ward Sr., his father.
What?
Standing right next to me.
Oh, gosh.
He comes up and he greets me, greets his dad. He said, how can I help you? We exchanged phone numbers. And for the rest of that school year, we text back and forth, Motorola two-way pagers.
Yeah. Oh my God.
All I saw with like my mentorship with him that summer was I thought I was going to learn a lot about basketball by staying with him. Yeah. I learned about what it takes to be a man of faith. See, what I learned from him was how to become a man of character. I watched him as a husband. I watched him as a father. I watched him as an athlete. I watched him as a black man. And it changed my whole life. That's
one ticket.
That's why I'm telling you, when I tell people I know that there's a God, is because when I look back and I see where I'm at today, it's no doubt that God's had his hand in my life. I'm from the inner city of Trenton, New Jersey, right? And where God has brought me, 7-figure entrepreneur, multiple 6-figure speak. All that is because of the impact, influence, but all that stems from my faith, and it shows I made a lot of mistakes. But God's mercy and grace is real.
Amazing story. I mean, when you talk about integrating and you talk about gave me goosebumps because you think of pivotal moments that are in our lives that God steps in and changes everything if we're willing to listen, if we're willing to be there, if we're willing to take what he's offering us at the time. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And let me add this real quick, Doc. Even with speaking, right? People told me for years, like, oh, you have a gift of speaking. And I'm like, I never believed in my own ability. I used to think like, I'm just speaking, I'm just talking, like you and I having a conversation right now. And then I told myself, okay, I'm really going to pursue this. After I had did a keynote presentation for free, and after the keynote presentation, people were coming up to me thinking that I was a professional speaker. So I'm like, okay, maybe I do have something. So then I started thinking about this one program. I'm like, all right, maybe this program can help me. At the time, it was the biggest investment I ever made in myself because I had a scholarship just like you to go to college. That was an act of faith. And that act of faith, today, I'm still benefiting from. Tell me God won't do it. As my grandmother say, won't he do it?
Won't he do it? Tell me he won't. Try to tell me that he won't do it.
Come on now. Come on, brother.
Oh man, it is just so neat to see how, you know, when you're looking and when you're saying, God, you know, show me something, and then he let him do the work, right? Oh, so crazy. You know, I obviously want to be respectful of your time, but I want to kind of, if we can, just talk a little bit about health. You know, I mentioned earlier that you know, the average black man lives to about 73. You know, and thinking, you know, time that we can't get it back. What can we do as black men, you know, that can help us live to 100. You know, my dad's 85 now and he's running track meets. And I'm like, Dad, I'm not going to run in a track meet. You know, I just not. You know, you know, 23-second 100 meters, but he's doing it, you know, and it's like,
wow,
what do we do, you know, to stop this, you know, belief that the health, you know, whether it's the health system or what we got to eat, put in our bodies, what, you know, mentally, you know, a lot, I think of our reason for dying so early is the stress that we put on ourselves mentally that just drain us. You know, your granddad working 2 full jobs, you know, most of his life, you know, or some things. So what do you do, or what can you advise other folks to do that can help?
Man, I think having these discussions to start, right? I think it starts with having discussions. And then I think it's about bringing people into different spaces that can help educate us, right? I'm a fine believer now, just as you are. That's the reason why we went on to get our advanced degrees, the value of an education. So if you bring in some folks that can help educate us, education should shift our perspective. If you shift our perspectives, then you'll change the outcome. Right now, some things are hereditary, you know, some things is just in our bloodline. But if you recognize there's some things in your bloodline, then maybe you need to pivot and do some things different. Right? Maybe you need to make some adjustments. Now, my grandfather, as we're talking about in Papa City, like, he's fortunate. Like, again, God's hands, right? He just turned 95 last week, 95 years old, and he's still in his right mind. Still have a good conversation. His memory is still there. He's still walking around. Listen, Dr. B, when I tell you, I'm so encouraged and inspired. But I think one of the things that really helped him was, like you said, his stress level was always like nothing really seemed to rock him like that. Right? He's always been an even keeled person. He didn't always eat right. I ain't gonna lie about that. He didn't eat right at all. But I think the fact that his stress level was down has helped him to be able to extend the longevity of his life. But I think for us, it's education, just like everything else, man. We need to be educated, you know, because without an education, you don't know what you don't know. It's the same thing with finances, right? You don't know what you don't know. You don't understand tax strategy unless you understand, you know, how it can benefit you. You know, absolutely. But that's all education.
Oh my gosh. And you think about, you know, the toxicity of stress is so much more than what can happen in food, and it can happen there. So, hey, so I'm just going to let you, whatever it is that we missed, that we didn't get to talk about, that you would like to impart on people, it's your time. I know you got stuff to do that you got to go to, and so I want to respect that. But at the same time, so you can take 1 minute, you can take 4 minutes, but what would you love to leave with folks that we didn't get to talk about today? I mean, we have been literally talking straight for, you know, 50 minutes. That has been, it feels like I've been talking to you for 10 minutes already. It's just, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do it. We're going to have to do it again. We're going to have to spend some more time, find some other time. But what do you want to leave everybody with?
Oh man, that's a great question. I got a couple of things that come to my mind. One is, right, like fear. Right. Like, people often have, in terms of reaching their goals, their dreams and aspirations, people often let fear paralyze them, Doc. And there's a quote, I can't remember who said it, but the quote is, fear has kept more people from accomplishing their goals than failure ever will. Right. Wow. Because fear will paralyze us. So my thing is this, for those that are listening, is don't let fear paralyze you. Have faith that if God has given you the ability to do it, right, and He's giving you a desire and you have the ability to do it, you can accomplish it. So step out on faith and believe, like, understand that it may not happen right now. It may not be 5 years from now. It may not be 10 years from now. But look at Morgan Freeman. He didn't get his big break until he was like 50 years old. But guess what? The one thing he didn't do, he didn't give up. Giving up cannot be an option, right? Like, as Kobe told Devin Booker, be legendary. In order to be legendary, you have to be consistent. You have to be resilient. It takes grit. Like, giving up cannot be an option, because if you give up, you're going to go to the grave. And that's why they say the graveyard is the richest place on earth, because people die with the talent, time, and treasure. They never maximize their potential. And oftentimes because they wasn't willing to step out on faith. If you never step out, there's one thing we know for certain: you won't accomplish it. So if you set out to accomplish it, even if you make some mistakes or some hurdles along the way, you can turn the page, move on to the next chapter, but at least you gave it your all. So my words to wisdom to everybody would be resilient, right? Go after your dreams and goals, because the impossible is possible.
Wow, Reggie, thank you, Dr. Wright, for just, getting on. I told you this was going to be fantastic. I told you this was going to be amazing. I hope you listen to this several times. I hope you hit subscribe or whatever, but make sure you send this to somebody that could benefit from it. This is one of those opportunities where you say, I want you to listen to this. This is for you. I heard this for you. Now, you did hear it for yourself, and I want you to, the notes that you took for yourself today, start implement them in your life and start putting in your life. And so I want to thank you all for being a part of another episode of the Journey to Freedom podcast. We are going to do more, like I said, 100 men this year. And just know that you are God's greatest gift. Right? He loves you if you allow him to, and that you can make anything possible. Just like Dr. Wright said, the impossible is possible. Your rooms that you're in, take very good care of who those are. So look forward to talking to you on the next one. You guys have amazing, wonderful, awesome, just incredible rest of your day. Talk to you later.